This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everyone. Bruchim Abam. Tonight is our last year before Chag Purim. Haba Aleinu L'Tova. And what we're going to discuss tonight is Dvarim Ha'imdim Berumah Shalaylam. Really out of this world. Maybe much of the information you're going to hear tonight, maybe you heard it before. But even so, we're going to present it in a completely original and novel way. And really try to explain a little bit tonight already. We're under the influence, not of the Yayin yet, but of Tainus Esther. Already this is the calendar date of Tainus Esther. And the question is, what exactly is Tainus Esther? And I've conducted polls. I've done polls. And you ask most people, what is Tainus Esther? Most people think it's to commemorate the fact that Esther fasted. And really, it has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that Esther fasted. Esther fasted Pesach time. So Tainus Esther has nothing to do with Esther's fast. What is Tainus Esther? The simple meaning of Tainus Esther, the Mishnah Berurah brings down, is that we were supposed to be eradicated on Chas v'Shalom, Lahashmid, Laragul Yabed on Yud Gimel Adar, and the Gezerah was turned over, and we were able to attack our enemies. And we have a tradition, and we have a minhag, that whenever we go to war, we fast. So that means that in the times that Klal Yisrael went to kill out Amalek on Yud Gimel Adar, they fasted. Now, we don't know that they fasted. We have no evidence. It's not in the Megillah. It's not in the Gemara. We have no medrash that says that they fasted in times of Esther. But we're just assuming they did because that's Minhag Yisrael. And to commemorate the Tainus that we're assuming they fasted, we also fast. Which is very difficult. We don't know they fasted. I'm sure they did. But we went to many wars throughout history, and we fasted many times, and we don't commemorate any of those Tanesim. Why do we specifically commemorate Tainus, the Tainus of Yud Gimel Adar? If you look in the Megillah, we know Megillah says the Baruch HaKodesh Nechtava was written with the Divine Spirit. And that means the same way the student of Torah is authorized to examine every sentence and every word and every letter. And if there's a big letter or a small letter, we have to ask ourselves, what's the significance, what's the meaning? It's the same thing with Megillah Esther. It was written Baruch HaKodesh. And there are a few anomalies in Megillah Esther, a few big letters. One of the big letters is in the beginning of the Megillah, Chur, Karpas, Uscheles. Chur, Karpas, Uscheles, we have a big ches. We have a big ches. What is that big ches doing there? And classically, when we want to know about the Ramazim in the Chumash or in the Torah, the first place to check, you look in the Balaturim and you look in the Roikeach. We've already over the last couple of weeks, we've mentioned many Ramazim of the Roikeach, and the Roikeach on the spot points out the Ches of Chur. Ches is 8. It's a remez to the fact that Achashverosh put on not only the Big Day Kahuna, but the Big Day Kohen Gadol, the 8 begadim of the Kohen Gadol. That's the significance of the Big Ches. And we come to the end of the Megillah, and at the end of the Megillah it tells us that Esther Hamalka recorded Megillah Esther as we have it today. And at the end of the Megillah we encounter a big tuf. Vatichtov Esther Hamalka Bas Avichayo Umardechai HaYehudi Eskal Toikef. She wrote the Megillah. We have a big tuf. What's the meaning of that? Why does it have a big tuf? And again, the Roikeach points out that the tuf is written big to indicate that this was not a one-time writing. This wasn't a writing for a decade or for 100 years. It was a writing forever. It was an eternal writing. It was a big ksiva, and therefore there's a big tuf. Interestingly, when Esther proposed the idea of recording the Megillah, so the Chachamim said we can't write it. It already says 3 times in Tanakh about wiping out Amalek. That means, and we have a tradition, Shalishim v'loy ribeim, only 3 times and not 4 times. Until Esther found a remez in the Chumash that we could write it one more time from the pasuk Kesoiv Zoisi Karoin Basefer. Says the Roikeach, the Gematria, Vatichtov Esther Hamalka Bas Avichayo is the same numerical value as Zoisi Karoin Basefer V'sim Be'oznei Yeshua Ki. Okay. Says Roikeach another remez. Why is there another tuf? A big tuf here. The tuf is which letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the last letter, the 22nd letter. Al Pi the Medrash, there were 22 women who made a big impact on Klal Yisrael, Esther being the 22nd. That's why in Eishes Chayil, Shlomo HaMelech says 22 psukim in honor of the Eishes Chayil. in memory of the 22 great Jewish women, beginning with Sarah, ending with Esther Hamalka. 22, therefore there's a big tuf in Vatichtav Esther. So what we have so far is 2 random big letters. The ches is the 8 big day kahuna, and the tuf is the big tuf, the big writing, the eternal writing. What we're looking for is there a common theme to explain the 2 big letters together that would explain why dafka, a big ches, and a big taf. Also, there's a mitzvah. One of the mitzvahs hayom of Purim. It's not one of the big 4, but nevertheless, the language of the Gemara is it's a chiyuv. Amar Rava mechayev inish lebesumei bepuraya ad layada bein arham lebarach Mordechai. By the way, we mentioned, not here yet, but the reason why Rava is the Baal HaMemra of this statement is because Rava was a Gilgal of Lot, and Lot came to this world al day Yayin. And therefore, Rava throughout Shas, whenever there's a Gemara about Yayin, take it to the bank, it's always Rava. Because since Lot did something inappropriate with Yayin, so Rava came to him, okay, it's a different shmooze. No. What's the inyan of this mitzvah? It's a very odd mitzvah. Normally, Shlomo Melech, how many times does he warn about the dangers of Yayin? So many ills of society take place through wine. And here we have a mitzvah to get drunk, that you don't know if you're coming or going. What's the mitzvah of that? What's the inyan of that? There's a very mysterious medrash. The Yalkut Shimoni in Tehillim Perek Chafez, look at number 6. The Yalkut Shimoni says, a house that has snakes in it. Raise your hand if you have snakes in your house. Okay, good. If your house has snakes in it, what do? You get the horn of a ram. Okay, it's good to know. People might think they have to call an exterminator. It'll save you some money. You get a horn of a ram. You smoke into it. Okay. And then the snakes run away. It's always good to have it in your back pocket, this little, tidbit of information, that if you have snakes in your house, just pull out the ram's horn, pump some smoke into it, and the snakes leave. It works every time, guaranteed. Says the Medrash, where do we learn this from? As soon as Esther came to the scene, Haman ran away. Very odd. What does Esther chasing away Haman got to do with, the ram's horn chasing away the snakes? Well, says the Ben Ishchai, says the Ben Yehoyada, Hafla V'Fela. The Gemara says in Masechta Yuma that Esther in Perek Chafez of Tehillim is compared, who remembers, to Ayelas HaShachar, the morning star. And the Gemara says, why is Esther compared to the morning star? Just like the morning star is the end of the night, Esther is the last miracle. So Esther is the last miracle. How's Esther the last miracle? We have so many miracles. We have Hanukkah. We have many miracles. For some people to be here tonight at a shir, it's a ness, right? There are many nisim in a place. To get through a day, it's a ness. What do you mean Esther is the last miracle? So the Ben Yehoyada says, the last miracle in world history will be the downfall of Amalek and the downfall of Edom. Esther is compared to the ram, Ayelas HaShachar. Says the Ben Yehoyada, really the foundation point of tonight's shir. And we're going to take it throughout history. And that is that every year when we learn the Megillah and we do the mitzvahs of Purim, we are destroying Amalek a little bit more until ultimately he is eradicated and he's dissipates and he's vaporized. It's not that in the times of Purim, Esther conquered and Mordechai destroyed Amalek and they're gone forever. It's every single year there's looming Amalek. Okay, and this is going to be not only found in today's shir, this is a principle in history. Amalek's klipa, his force, is always prevalent, is always looming, and every year when we learn the Megillah and we go through the mitzvahs hayom, we're eradicating the kayach of Amalek and the Nachash. Many years ago, I saw a tshuva, and I really wanted to give a share on it, but I just didn't have enough information. And I searched for years and years and years, until a couple days ago. And then it just started flowing in like an avalanche. It happens to be the avalanche always comes, at the busiest time, but what can you do when it comes? You take it as it comes. The floodgate, the Mayanois HaChachma, Hashem opened up. I'm telling you, this is Lo Ye'uman K'Yisupar. I found the tshuva. Everybody knows that Tainus Esther, is more lenient than the other fast days. Is that really true? And look, I'll admit to you, halachically it's true. It is. Especially this year, it's a nidcha. You still have to fast, It's, but Nevertheless, halach, but al pi Kabbalah, or mystically, it's the most important of the fast days. Why is that? And that is, there's a Shaus Tshuva Sefer, Shevet HaKahasi, of Rav Shammai Kahas Gross, and I saw this many years ago, and I know what to do with it. That he quotes the Mekubalim, that when Haman made a decree, Lahashmid Laroi Guliyaved, we never abolished the decree. We never abolished it. In fact, you could even say that the Megillah says, Ki kesav asher nichtav b'shem hamelech. If the king makes a decree, and whenever it says melech in the Megillah, it refers to God, Ki kesav nichtav b'shem hamelech, ein lahashiv, can never be retracted. So the gezerah of Haman looms every year. But it was deferred. It was deferred. What was it deferred to? The Mekubalim say it was deferred to the year 1648. 1648. You could say you can make up any year. No! That's why there's a big ches and a big tough in the Megillah. To indicate that the Gezerah of Haman got big, came out, was aroused in the year 1648. That's the big ches and the big tough. And therefore, the reason for Tainus Esther, very important, is that since every year the Gezerah of Haman is looming, and we have to be very afraid every year when Yud Gimel Adar comes, Chazal Baruch Kodsham instituted a Tainus to protect Klal Yisrael, so that the Gezerah of Haman, which looms every year, is not chal, does not divav on anything. And therefore he says, even though a pregnant woman or a nursing woman would not fast on Tainus Esther, but nevertheless, okay, so you're not going to fast on Tainus Esther, so we'll go out to graze and we'll eat. No. You got to take it easy. Even if you're not fasting, you have to realize this is a Yom Chamor Ma'id. So I saw this many years ago. I didn't know what to do with it. First of all, who are these Mekubalim? The way I work is if somebody tells me the Mekubalim say something, if you don't tell me who it is and where it is, so, it's called anecdotal evidence. Well, it's not, I need to know where. I need the Makar, I need the source. So he doesn't say who the Mekubalim are. I never heard the big ches, the big tough. The Rekech says a different shot. Who are these Mekubalim? Lo and behold, I came across a sefer, the Yismach Moshe. I don't know if anyone nobody ever heard of this sefer. It's the Yismach Moshe's commentary to Nevi'im Uksuvim, and there's a little kuntris on Esther. It's called Osus Rimoini. Okay, if you heard of it, Kala Kavod. I'll give you a big hug. You heard of it? The Yismach, I know the Yismach Moshe. Not only do I know the Yismach Moshe, my Baba in Europe, she was protected by a woman who is a Einukol, the Yismach Moshe. She had the Yismach Moshe's Gartel. So I know about the Yismach Moshe. But I never heard of this sefer, Osus Rimoni. The Osus Rimoni. He wants to know, there's some psukim in the Megillah that say like this. Listen to this. It says, Vimei ha-Purim ha'ila lo yavru mitoicha Yehudim. Purim will never cease. V'zichram lo yasam izaram, the memory will never end. So it's like repetitious. Well, why are we repeating the same thing again and again? It says Purim will never cease. The memory will never end. V'atichtoiv Esther, so Esther wrote the Maisa. Why the repetition? What's V'mei ha-Purim lo yavru, v'zichram lo yasuf, v'atichtoiv Esther. Says the Yismach Moshe, you need to look in a history book, Josephus. The second part of Josephus is called She'eris Yisrael. And in Josephus, in the second part, it says that the reason why there's a big tough and a big ches in the Megillah is in memory of the year 1648 when the Gezerah of Haman was chal. Says the Yisrael, does anyone here know, do you know that Chazal, not Chazal, but the Achronim made a fast day to mourn the losses of 1648, 1649. What day of the year is that? Chaf Sivan. Says the Yismach Moshe, that's Merumas in the Pasuk. Ki Yod al Case Ka. Case Kaf Sivan. Case Kaf Samach is Chaf Sivan. That's when the Yad of Hashem, and that's when his throne and name was incomplete because of Haman. That's when Haman's Gzeira came to fruition. On Chav Sivan, case. Says the Yismach Moshe, what the Rebbe Shalom did is in order to preserve Klal Yisrael. If he would have allowed Haman's decree to come to fruition back then Klal Yisrael would have been eradicated. So the number of Jews that were supposed to be Chas v'Shalom annihilated in the times of Haman Predominantly, the annihilation took place in the year 1648 and other years. But because they took place predominantly in 1648, that's why you have a big Taf and a big Ches. So again, who are these Mikubalim? Maybe the Yismach Moshe, but we'll see it's more. Says the Yismach Moshe, and now we could read the psukim like this. Vimeha Purim ha'ela lo yavru. Purim, what does Purim mean? The lottery. The lottery that Haman cast to annihilate the Jews, it didn't just pass. It's going to be chal. It's going to happen. You can't just negate it. Lo yavru, it will take place. But the Rebbeinu Shalom made it take place when? He pushed it off. And why? Why did God push it off? Why v'mei hapurim ha'ela lo yavru? So that v'zichram lo yosef, so that the memory of the Jewish people never cease. So in order to ensure that, v'tichtoiv Esther with the big tough, Esther was able to defer it to the year 1648, 1649. By the way, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The Chassam Sofer himself. Now, it's not really the Chassam Sofer. In the Torah Moshe, so Chassam Sofer has a name called Rabbi Shimon Sofer, the Rav of Erloi. He wrote something called Shir Ma'oin. He writes the exact same thing in the name of the Sheirus Yisrael, that the Gezerah of Haman was not eradicated, was not nullified. It took place in 1648. As our tradition is, there's a big Tuf and a big Ches. He even says maybe the Chelmenitsky and the Cossacks were Gilgulim of Amalek. That's what the Shir Ma'oin, Reb Shimon Sofer says. Then he says like this, but everything that takes place has to be in the Chumash itself. So where is this in the Chumash? So he says, Oyam v'noira. The Medrash tells us that Haman was not hanged on a regular tree. He was hanged on a thorn. Where is the first time in the Chumash we have the word thorn? V'koitz v'dardar tatzmiach lach. Says Reb Shimon Sofer. V'koitz, because Haman was hanged on the thorn, and his gezerah didn't take place then. You know when it took place? Dardar. Dar, many generations later. So you say, oh, come on, that's... No! Dardar is Gematria Tavches, the year 1648. V'koitz, because Haman was hanged, Dardar, therefore the gezerah was pushed off to 1648. And Oyoim v'noira, you know who else says this? One of the greatest all-time Mekubalim, Reb Shamshin Me'ash Shapoli, he writes in the Nitzutzei Shimshon that the Gezerah of Haman was never nullified, it never ceased, it was never abolished. The Rebbeinu Shalom deferred it to when? To the year Tav Ches. That's why there's a big Tav and a big Ches. And that's why Kiyad al Keiska Chaf Sivan. Okay, very good. So now when you see the Megillah, you realize these anomalies are not for naught, they're not empty, Chas v'shalom. These are, it's teeming with historical message. It's telling you about the future of Klal Yisrael. Now, if you view the Megillah in this light, you can't help but ask yourself, these are not the only anomalies in Megillah Esther. There are not only 2 big letters, there are 3 small letters in Megillah Esther. Where are these 3 letters in small letters in Megillah Esther? Well, if you take a look at number 13. You have Vayaku haYehudim oiveim. The Jews smit among their enemies. Makas cherev vehereg v'avdan. They killed their enemies. Vayasu b'soineim kirtzainam, and they did to their enemies at will. Uveshushan habiru harga haYehudim ve'abed chamesh me'yoseh. And you have the Aseres b'nei Haman. And lo and behold, you look in the word Parshan Dasa, and you see in the word Parshan Dasa, you have a little Taf. And then in the word Parmashna, you have a little Shin. And then in the word Vaizasa, you have a little Zayin. Now, had it just been for the Roy Keach, so you say, I don't know, each one might carry a random meaning, but according to Reb Shimon Sofer, and Reb Shamshin Meshapoli, and the Shalshuva Shevet HaKahasi, and the Yismach Moshe, the anomalies in Megillah Esther contain in them specific historical message. So the question is, what are these small letters? And maybe we could add, okay, why are some letters big and some letters small? Is there a meaning? Is there a reason why sometimes it's big and sometimes it's small? One of the most difficult things to understand in the Megillah Esther is number 14. So you have to know what took place. The Jews come into Shushan. They knock off 500 guys. They kill the 10 sons of Haman. They're dead. Okay? You know what dead means? Dead is dead. Dead like a doorknob. And Esther comes to the king, and the king says to Esther, Esther, whatever you want, I'll give you, ad chatzi hamalchus. And this time he doesn't even say ad chatzi hamalchus. He says whatever you want. Imagine, the guy turns to his wife, no, Sprinza American Express Platinum, here it is, do whatever you want. That is what Achashverosh tells Esther, whatever you want. So if I was Esther, I would say, build the Beis HaMikdash, I don't know, give me $10 million. What does Esther ask for? She asks for one thing. Vatoimer Esther mal melech toiv. We want to kill our enemies tomorrow. We want to hang the 10 sons of Haman. Hey Esther, they're dead. You don't hang dead people. Nobody hangs dead people.
208 sons.
No, the Aseres B'nai Haman. The Aseres B'nai Haman, they were dead. Why does she want to hang the 10 dead sons of Haman? What's that all about? Isn't that a very odd request? So Rabbi say, historically, let's try to understand. We know Megillah Esther, and the Shabbos we're going to be dealing with Amalek. Is there any nation about whom we could say, well, this nation is Amalek? I'm not telling you things that you heard. I don't want to hear about what you heard, what somebody told you. This Maisa, that Maisa. I want to know, do we have any evidence? Is there any halacha? Is there any makar about any particular nation that we could say that that's Amalek? Okay, so there is a well-known story about Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld in the year 1898 when the leader of Germany, Wilhelm, came to Israel, at the time Palestine, and everybody came out to greet him because everybody remember the shir about going to inauguration, and when a king comes out, you're supposed to go and make a bracha, shechalak mikvaydai lebasar v'dam. So Kemat, the entire Yishuv, went out to make a bracha on this Wilhelm, except for two Gedolei Yisrael, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld and Rabbi Tzvi Michal Shapiro. They didn't go out. Everyone went out. Some people just, out of curiosity, and others really to make a bracha. And they asked Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, this is published in his biography, Yishal HaChoima, Rebbe, why did you not go out to make a bracha on Wilhelm? And he said, my Rabbi Shulek Diskin, told me that he has a tradition from the Vilna Gaon that Germany is Amalek. And they could look good, and they could dress well, and their boots could be shining, and they could be immaculately groomed. But as well dressed as they are, that's how evil and vicious they are on the inside, and therefore it's bad enough we're not able to kill Amalek today. I'm going to go make a bracha on them, and he did not go to make a bracha on them. So the question is, okay, where does this tradition of the Vilna Gaon come from? What evidence is there? How do we know that the Vilna Gaon said that Germany is Amalek? So it's interesting. There is a prophetic Gemara Masechta Megillah, Vav Amud Aleph, going on to Vav Amud Beis. The Gemara is talking about a tefillah that the Gemara identifies as the tefillah of Yaakov Avinu. It's a pasuk in Tehillim, looking over 17. Al titein Hashem avaye rasha. God Almighty, do not grant the desires of the wicked. Zimamoy al tafek. Do not remove his muzzle. Yarumu Sela, you'll be exalted forever. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yitzchak, what does this pasuk mean? Says the Gemara, Yaakov Avinu turns to Ribono Shalom. He says, Ribono Shalom, Al titein le'esav harasha tavas libai. Don't give Esav his desire. Who is the desire of Esav? What does it mean, don't give Esav his desire? Zu Germamia shel Edom. This is Germamia. If Germania would just go out, they would destroy the whole world. So the Gemara is saying that if Germania is let loose, they will destroy the world. Now who's Germania? So I know Germany, right? Because it sounds like it. No, we don't do things that way. We need intelligent evidence. Oh, it sounds close enough is not good. Okay? Comes Rabbi Yaakov Emden, and Rabbi Yaakov Emden identifies for us in his Hagoyis and Masechta Megillah. Kimeduma, it is my opinion, Ratzaloimer, Germania. Aha! Germania is Germany, right? Mehechi Tesi. How do you know? So he goes further. Ashkenaz Shalom, that's Germany. Okay, so he doesn't leave any room to, no doubts. Rabbi Yaakov Emden identifies Germania in the Gemara Megillah as Germany. And Yaakov Avinu is saying, God, do not give Esav his desire. If Germany would go out, they would destroy the whole world. Say, what are you talking about? They would destroy the whole world. Germany was never a world superpower. I mean, for the first 5,600 years of the world's existence, Germany never had a chance of conquering the world. What is Yaakov Avinu talking about? And then the Gemara continues. Because Yaakov is mispalel, zemomoy al tofek, remove not their muzzle. That means, imagine, Esav has a muzzle. There is something that keeps Esav in check. There's something that keeps them in line. What is it? So the Gemara says a story. Va'amar Reb Chama bar Chanina, Telas mea ketiri taga ika begarmamya shel Edom. Germany has 300 crown princes. Utlas mea v'shitin v'chamisha marzavni ika beroimi. And there are 365 governors of Rome. So Edom has 300 rulers, and Rome has 365 governors. Uvechol yoima nafki hani la'ape hani. And every day they fight against each other. Edom against Roimi, Esav against Rome. Umikdal chad right now, and they kill each other. And they're busy, and they're preoccupied appointing a new king. So listen to what this Gemara is saying. It's Divrei Nevuah. The Gemara is saying that there are two things that keep Germany in check. Number one is they're disunified. There is no achdus. There's no unity. They have 300 generals. They have 300 crown princes. They have too many republics. They can never unite. The fact that they're fragmented keeps them in check. That is the first muzzle of Germany. And the second muzzle is their eternal and constant battle with Rome. They're constantly fighting Edom, Roimi. They're constantly fighting Rome. But, comes out, if Germany were ever to unite and then make an ally and make a treaty with Rome, they would destroy the world. In other words, what this Gemara is saying is that Yaakov Avinu davens to Hashem Ribbono Shel Olam, do not let Germany loose. Don't let him loose. Because if he's let loose, he will destroy the world. And there are only two things that keep him in check. Number one, they're fragmented. Number two, they're constantly fighting with Rome. And that's why Germany never had an opportunity or a fighting chance to be a world superpower. That is until the year 1871. And Bismarck rises to them. And he unites all their Germanic republics for the first time in history. By the way, if you want to know, really, are there really 300 princedoms of Germany? So let me read to you from William Shire, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, page 121. I'll give you the Maramakum later. Right now you only have the Torah. Okay? By the end of the Middle Ages, which had seen Britain and France emerge as unified nations, Germany remained a crazy patchwork of some 300 individual states. So just in case you have any doubts about the Gemara, it's Agadata, we don't know what it means. No, we know what it means. Agadata is Torah Misinai. The Gemara says 300, that's what happened. The Hebrew Encyclopedia, the political disintegration of Germany had far-reaching economic effects. 300 princedoms and free cities guarded their economic autonomy. Okay, this Sikha is published in a sefer called Or Moshe, or Rav Moshe Pinto, but it's originally, this is material of the Discovery program, the Isha Torah program. So I want to dedicate what I'm about to say in honor of my father. I heard this from him probably hundreds of times. He had the zchus for many years to travel all over the world to give many classes, but this particular class on behalf of Kiruv Rechokim, and influenced thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. We're presenting it today in a new light, in the context of the history of 1648, 1649. And so let's continue on this journey. So the Gemara is making an astounding prediction. The Gemara is saying that if Germany would ever reunite and ever ally itself with Rome, with Italy, it would go forth and destroy the world. So what happens? 1871, Bismarck unites all the Germanic republics. It set into motion the events that precede World War I. Germany is primed to destroy the world. There's only one problem. What's Italy doing during this time? Italy begins World War I neutral. By the end of the war, they're on the Allied forces. Germany is defeated. Why? Because it's muzzled, because of its combat, because of its conflict with Rome, with Italy. But then Hitler rises to power. And Hitler again begins to unify all the Germanic republics. And his generals and his officers and advisors tell him, you're crazy, the world will never let you do this. Hitler says, no, this is the only way to ascend. And then Hitler makes one of the most astonishing moves in political history. He decides to get the Italians on his side. Now, if you know anything about Italians, is they know how to make pizza, but they can't fight to save their life. Nobody wants Italians on their side. And Hitler makes a treaty with Mussolini, and he broke every treaty ever made with Poland, with Russia. There's only one treaty that Hitler never broke. Mussolini. Hitler remained in alliance with Mussolini until the end of World War II. Why? Because Hitler knows that if Germany would but go forth and shed the Zamam and shed the leash and unite all the 300 republics and unify with Italy, it would go out and destroy the world. Hitler articulated his war against the Jews very clearly in an article, and this is important for every Jew to know. See, Hitler understood what a Jew is, unfortunately, more than we do. Hitler said, there are two defects that the Jewish people have cast on the world. There are two defects, says Hitler. We are barbarians and we're proud of it. And I will free the world of the shackles of the defects of the Jew. The Jew has cast on the world the physical defect and the defect of conscience. The physical defect is the Milah. And, says Hitler, the Jewish people have invented the defect of self-discipline and morals. But I will free the world from the defect of the guf, and I will free the world from the defect of consciousness. And we then will be able to revert back to being proud barbarians. So let's understand now. Hitler said the following: all my wars against Russia, against France, against England, it's all not simzach. That's not the war. There's only one war, Hitler said. The war against the Jew. So coming back to Megillah Esther, Esther Hamalka understood this concept, this Kabbalistic idea, that when Haman made his decree of Lahashmet Laragali Abed, that decree was not abolished, it wasn't nullified, it looms forever. Lo Yaleinu. And Esther saw into the future, that when they killed the 10 sons of Haman, and they killed the 500 Amalekim, Esther then turns to the king, Vayomer Esther, Im al HaMelech Toiv. And we have a tradition that when the Megillah says HaMelech Achashverosh, it refers to Achashverosh. When the Megillah says HaMelech, it can refer to God. And Esther turns to God and she says, Ribono Shel Olam, Im al HaMelech Toiv, Yinosein Gam Machar. What's Machar? Yesh Machar La'achar Zman. Sometimes Machar means in the far out future. Esther saw in the far out future we would be facing another 10 Amalekim. Esther davens, please God, allow us to take revenge against another 10 Amalekim. 1945, the war is over. 6 million Yidden were murdered by the Germans. It's October 1945, and the International Society set up a war tribunal in the city of Nuremberg, which was a hot seat of many of the Nazi propaganda, and many of the rallies took place in Nuremberg, and they felt that would be the right place to judge the Nazi criminals. And they gathered together in October of 1945 11 Nazi war criminals. And their names are Shem, Risham, Yerkov, Yamach Shemam, V'Zichram, Herman, you have it over here if you want to sheet. Herman Göring, who was Hitler's number 2, second to Hitler. Wilhelm Frick, the interior minister. Joachim van Ribbentrop, the minister of foreign affairs. Field Marshal Keitel, he was the head of the Wehrmacht. Ernst Kaltenbrunner, he was the head of the Gestapo. It was under his auspices that Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, Hashem Yimkom Damai, was killed. Julius Streicher, the editor of Der Stürmer. Fritz Sauckel, Alfred Jodl, Hans Frank, Alfred Rosenberg, who was Hitler's philosopher, and other Rishon. These 11 individuals were put on trial. The trial began in November 21st, 1945. What year was that? Tafshin Vav. And there were a number of judges. There were judges represented, I believe, by the United States, by England, and it was decided that France would also have a representative. The French judge was the most sympathetic. What do you expect? And he issued a verdict that they should be executed by the firing squad, and the other judges did not agree with him. They said that's too much of a dignified death, and they outvoted him, and they said these guys need to be hanged. They were such achazarim, they were so cruel, they were barbarians, they deserved to be hanged. And we have an account of when they heard about the verdict. When they heard that they were going to die, they accepted it with a degree of equanimity. They understood it was coming. But when they heard they were going to be hanged, they became so demoralized. They said, this is not something, they felt they didn't deserve that. That's such a demeaning way to go. They felt that, they laughed. They didn't know what to do with themselves. And they all went to their death. And let me read to you Newsweek, October 28th, 1946. Of all the Nazi criminals that were killed on that day, you'll get the Maramakam later, I'll give it to you later. Only Julius Streicher went without dignity. He had to be pushed across the floor, wild-eyed and screaming, "Hail Hitler!" Mounting the steps, he cried out, "And now I go to God." He sure did. He stared at the witness facing the gallows and shouted, "Purim Fest, 1946. Purim Fest? It wasn't Purim. It happened to have been Hoshana Rabbah. Why didn't he say, Chanukah Sameach or Chag Kosher V'Sameach? What's Purim Fest? Apparently he understood very well that the hanging of these 10 Amalekim, Rishaim, these 10 demons, was a reenactment of the Yom Tov of Purim, of the hanging of the Asaras B'nai Haman. He understood that. If he didn't realize it, his neshama, whatever he had of it, realized it. This was Purim 1946. So you'll ask, wait a second, 1946, Purim, it was Hoshana Rabbah. Wasn't the case scheduled for a different date? Wasn't the case scheduled for June time? And the truth is, it was scheduled for June time. But there were constant pleas for amnesty from the church, and the case was pushed off from June to October to Hoshana Rabbah. So you say, okay, so somehow these 10 sons of Haman have a connection to these 10 Nazis who were hung in Nuremberg. That is what Esther Hamalka was davening. That's what her tefillah was. She said, Imal HaMelech Toiv, God Almighty, the day will come when we're going to have to face another Haman. We're going to have to face another Amalek. And we're going to want to take revenge and give the Jewish people hope and strength to continue on. Please, God, Yinasein Gam Machar, in the future, allow us to hang the 10 Nazi criminals like we hung the 10 sons of Haman today. That was the tefillah of Esther Hamalka. So you'll ask, okay, what?
It was 11.
One killed himself. But wait a second. There were 11 Nazis who were tried in the Nuremberg trials. But the night before, Göring asked for his final meal, and he killed himself. And he took his life to join Hitler and Himmler. And the 11th Nazi who was supposed to be hanged the next day committed suicide. So Esther hit it on the button. The 10 sons of Haman were hanged again. So you'll ask, but wait a second. There were 10 sons of Haman and 11 Nazis, and one of them killed himself. Hey, wait a second. Haman had another child. Haman had a daughter. What did Haman's daughter do?
Killed herself.
She jumped off the roof. She killed herself. So 10 of Haman's sons were hanged. One of them committed suicide. So you'll ask, but she was a woman. I'm not going to speak about it publicly, but Goring was a deviant, and if you want to know more about it, I can tell you privately. It's mamish meduktuk bediktuk amar. 10 were hanged, one committed suicide. Yinasein gamachar la'ihudim asher b'shushan la'asais kedasaya. So you say, okay, maybe it's coincidence. That's really what Esther meant. I mean, that maybe it just happens to be that it worked out and it fits into our Torah that Esther said, and there were 10 sons of Haman and 10 Nazis. Well, Esther said, I'm not going to let you question this. And therefore, I'm going to put in the Megillah the exact date of the hanging of the 10 Nazi criminals. And that's why in the 10 sons of Haman, there are 3 small letters. Taf, Shin, Zayin. So you see, but Taf, Shin, Zayin is 1947. They were hanged in 1940. No. It was Taf, Shin, Zayin. It was Hoshana Rabbah right after Tishrei, but it was still 1946. So it was Purim Fest 1946. And the date was Taf, Shin, Zayin. So Esther is telling you, this is not a coincidence. I'm davening for a specific date on the calendar. Parmashta, the Taf, the Shin, the Zayin. Now, you have to know, first of all, who came up with this? Who realized this? Who recognized this? Who figured this out? This was figured out by none other than Rabbi Michael Dov Weissmandel, who's one of the most brilliant people ever lived. He was very involved in saving Yidden from the Holocaust, of paying for the right to release them. He wrote a book, Min HaNeitzar. Just tell you a little bit about him. Rabbi Michael Dov Weissmandel, he had a mind like a computer. And maybe we'll learn about some of his codes a little bit more. He could look at a letter and count thousands of letters later, and then from there count thousands later just with his eyes. And Rabbi Michael Dov Weissmandel was the one who discovered this code. It's printed in his biography, Ish Chamudais. So you say, well, wait a second. Tafshin Zayin. I mean, is that really exact? Does anybody know how many times does the year Tafshin Zayin? Tafshin Zayin is the year 707. How many 707s have there been in the history of Klal Yisrael? The year 707, the year 1707, the year 2707, the year 3707, the year 4707, and the year 5707. So okay, Esther said Tafshin Zayin, but which Tafshin Zayin? So Esther said, I'm not going to leave that to ambiguity. She put a big vav in the Megillah. The 6th time Tafshin Zayin appeared in world history. The 5707. There's a big vav. If you look at the Aseres B'nai Haman, there's a small taf in the Parshadasa, and a small shin in the Parmashta, and a small zayin in the Vaizasa. Tafshin Zayin. Which Tafshin Zayin? Vav. The 6th time. And Esther davens in the year 5707. Don't let that French judge, don't let the Pope plead for amnesty. Vatoimer Esther im ala melech toiv. Yinosin gamochar le'Yehudim asher b'Shushan la'asos kedas hayoim v'yis aseres b'nei Haman yislu. Everybody wants to know, in the Aseres b'nei Haman there are 10 extra words. What are the 10 extra words? Ve'es, 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 ve'es. It should say, Parshan Dosa, Dalfa, Nasposa. What's the VS? We know there's a klal in Shas. So I once saw, what's the gematria of VS? 407. What's the gematria of Oror? 407. Oror Parmashta, Oror Dalfa, and Oror Asposa. But it says Rabbi Michael Dov Weissmandel, we have a klal in Shas. We just learned it in Sukkah Sunday morning. If you don't come Sunday morning, you come this Sunday morning. We have a klal in Shas. S is Baal L'Rabbis. So who was V'esa Parmashta L'Rabbis? That one's for Keitling, and Ve'es is Marbe. All the 10 Rishaim. Each S is Marbe, another one of the 10 Nazi criminals. One S is for Frick, and one else is for Kaltenbrunner, and one else is for Streicher, and one S is for Sakel, and one S is for Jodel. They're all included in the Aseres B'nai Haman. Maybe we could offer the following thought. We wanted to know, why are some letters big and some letters small? I think we could explain quite amazingly. The big Tuf and the big Ches is when the Gezerah of Haman came out and was enlarged and was brought out to the world in the year 1648. But the small Tuf Shin Zayin is when we took Amalek and we diminished them. We killed their klipa. Tuf Shin Zayin is when we killed Amalek. Tuf Ches is in big. That's when the Gezerah of Haman came out into the world. Tuf Shin Zayin is when Amalek was diminished, when Amalek was dissipated. That's why they're small. So you'll say, then why did Esther make a big Vav? She could have made a small Vav. So I found in a Sefer, the big Vav is another time that Haman's Gezerah came out. The big Vav in the Megillah is the 6 million Yidden. That's the big Vav in Megillah Esther. That's why the Vav is big, not the Vav is small. Now I found in a Sefer, Itzer HaYediyos, which is a very reliable Sefer, although maybe someone out there will help me with this one. If you take the Gematria of Joachim Ribbentrop, and Ernest Kaltenbrunner, and Julius Streicher, and Alfred Rosenberg, and Wilhelm Keitel, and Alfred Jodl, and Arthur, and Hans Frank, and you add up exactly their names, you get the Gematria of Parshandosa, Dalfoin Aspasa, Poirasa, Adalia, Aridosa, Parmashta, Arisai, Aridai, Vaizosa, Aseres B'nai Haman. Now I tried it doesn't work.
How do you take the Gematria of the...
But he says it! So if anyone out there could figure out what he means, maybe Mr. Barkata, look, you gotta give him credit. I could have just sold it and told you it works, So... I'm honest with you, But I found in a very reliable Sefer of Yechiel Mechel Stern, so there's probably a way to calculate it. By the way, so the Tuf Ches is big. That's when the Gezerah of Haman came out. The Tuf Shin Zayin is small. That's when we caused the Klipa of Amalek to dissipate. There's the big Vav. The big Vav represents the 6 million Yidden. Hafla of a fella, so where does Haman fit in? You have the 10 sons of Haman, and you have the 10 Nazi criminals. But what about Haman himself? Who was he? Who was he? Hitler. How come we never found him? Nobody knows where he is. So, I'll tell you the name of the Sefer. I don't know much about it. In the Sefer Manois Aaron, Reb Shalom Aliyasi, Hitler was the Gilgal of Haman. And then he adds something, and I do not stand behind the statement, but I'm telling you this before Purim, that nobody ever saw Hitler take off his shoes. Certainly me, I never saw him take off his shoes. Why did he, or his boots? Why did he ever take off his boots? It says because he was a shed. Shedim have chicken feet. Again, this is not part of the shir. This is just for your information. You could do your own independent investigation whether Hitler in fact took off his shoes, did not take off his shoes. He writes in this Sefer that we have a tradition, I don't know who's the we and where this tradition came from, that Hitler never took off his shoes. Zozain Azoi. Zozain, he was a shed. Comes the Sefer. Now, I still didn't tell you. Okay, so really, who are these Mikubalim who say that Tuf Ches is 1648, and that the Gezerah of Haman is looming every year, and that there's a concept that the Gezerah of Haman was never abolished. Ki kesav asher nichta b'shem hamelech v'nachtem b'tabas hamelech ein lahashav refers to if God allowed this decree to take place, then it's going to happen. Who revealed this to us? That's right, the Sefer Chemdas Yamim. It comes from the Sefer Chemdas Yamim. That's but as we saw, Reb Sham Shemesh Shapoli quotes it, and the Chassam Sofer quotes it, and the Yismach Moshe quotes it. It's already canonized by the Gedolei Yisrael, but in origin, it comes from the the Chemdas Yomim. Now, I didn't even realize that. I only found it last night, well after Chatzot, that this comes from Sefer Chemdas Yomim. Mar v'Rabbi. Let me show you a few last things in the Chemdas Yomim. Says the Chemdas Yomim, why is God's name not in Megillas Esther? So everybody heard of many different Perushim. He said because Megillas Esther, in a way, is a very frightening sefer. It's a book of Peronius. It's the Gezerah of Haman, which was never abolished. And therefore the Rebbe Shem did not want to put his name to it. What's the reason why the Chachamim were not so agreeable to canonize Megillas Esther as part of the Tanakh? It's because to put in the Tanakh this Gezerah of Haman, they felt was a very frightening thing for Klal Yisrael. Marv Rabbi says the Chemdas Yomim and says the Ben Yehoyada and says all the Sifrei Kabbalah. Tainus Esther abolishes whatever left of the Gezerah of Haman there is, and as we started this year, that if you have a snake in your house, all you need to do is bring in the horn of Esther, you put some smoke into it, and that dissipates the snake. Says the Sefer Siach Besam. That's the reason for the mitzvah of Chayiv Inish Lebesume Bepuraya Adelo Yada Ben Arama. Why? Because there's this glooming gezerah. We don't know. What is it going to be chal on? So what you do is you become a little shikker, come out like a mess, and this way, if any gezeros of Haman were supposed to be chal, it's chal on the state of drunkenness, and this way we ward off all of the impact of the gezerah of Haman, and we're mispaler Mitzvah Hashem that this year when we lay in the Megillah, Mekayim the Mitzvah, the final straw on the back of Haman, the final glimmer of hope that Haman has should dissipate forever and ever. V'oivei Hashem yichlu b'bias kol tzedek v'mher v'yameinu. Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.